Okay, so now we're going to talk about the picture that I would say is worth a thousand words. If there was ever a picture in American history that has changed the course of history, I would argue it's a picture we're going to see. And it starts with this story of Emmett Till. And I'm sure you guys have heard a version of Emmett Till that they teach maybe in middle school or elementary school about this boy that got hurt or murdered uh, because of his skin color for whistling at a white woman. We're going to get more into the details. Actually, the whistling's not even a part of the accusations. But we're going to go into the details, and I'll tell you how I actually know a lot about the story in the end. So Emmett Till was this 14-year-old boy. He's from Chicago. Grew up in Chicago, and he was visiting his uncle Moses Wright in Money, Mississippi. Okay, so he's going to go down for the summer in between school years to spend time with his uncles, so his mother could work and other things are going on. And his mother sits him down, and she basically talks to him and says, "Look, Emmett, the South is different than Chicago. And it's not that Chicago wasn't de facto segregated, say, even though they didn't have signs and Jim Crow, you lived in the South Side, you're black. If you live on the North Side of Chicago, you're white. However, she explained to him that there's fountains and that everything is separated. You can't go in the wrong bathroom. There's rules in the South. And he's like, I know, Mama, I know. No, you have to listen to me. There's rules in the South. For example, in Mississippi, you can't look a white man in the eyes. That's considered disrespectful as an African American. And he just kind of took it in jest, and he goes down to the South. He stays with his uncle and his cousin, hangs out with his cousin. And Emmett and his cousin went to a store, and you've heard that he was accused of whistling, and he wasn't actually whistling. He was accused of hitting on a white owner's wife. Okay, so the store owner's wife was working the counter at a convenience store, essentially, and he said she claimed that he said something along the lines of, "Have you ever been with a black guy before?" Now, if you know anything about Southern culture at the time, one of the biggest taboos was white and black people coming together. And one of the purest things that had to be protected mentally in the Southern chivalry, which is this idea that, there's some kind of honor and respect in our culture, is that white women are not to be with African American men. And actually, there's a term that we use negative today that comes from this. It's misogyny. And I don't know if you guys know what a misogynist is. A misogynist is somebody that believes that men are better than women. So if somebody says you're a misogynist, it's like you don't really like women or you hate women, and you think men are better. Just like a misanthrope. A misanthrope is somebody that hates all kinds of people. Well, the word misogyny actually was a legal term used early on in the century for the act of a black man being with a white woman. And that was almost always assumed to be rape. So if you've ever read To Kill a Mockingbird, you've heard of this concept. And that was the absolute worst thing that could happen in a lot of people's minds in the South. So him saying this or not saying this, just the idea was obviously going to be brought home. So she's going to go home. Who is she going to tell? She's going to tell her husband, the store owner. So she tells the store owner, her husband, and he just flips out. He loses it. He goes and grabs his buddy, and they go over and they knock and they bang on the door of Uncle Moses. And Uncle Moses opens the door, like, what's going on? And he pushes through the door, grabs Emmett, takes him out. Nobody ever sees the boy again. Police are involved. They're looking for this body. What has happened? Finally, they find the body. It's tied to almost like a propeller from like a boat, like a wheel well from a boat, and it was in a lake. Well, I'm sorry, a river. And what had happened was, and I can tell you next, is the store owner and his friend went in. They took Emmett. They said they took him out in a field, and they start beating him up and yelling at him and threatening him. and telling them, because he said something to his wife, and he said the boy was being disrespectful or being ornery in his point of view. So then it just escalated to the point where they killed the boy, and then they tied his body to this propeller of a like almost like a turning wheel of a boat, and then they threw the body in the river to hide it. Well, what happens next changes everything. So when they get the body back, they send it back to Chicago to his mother. His mother sees the coffin's closed, and she's like, "Let me see my boy." And the coroner is like, "Ma'am, the body is so desecrated and destroyed. You don't want to see him like this." And it's a specific instruction say, "Do not open the coffin." She said, "No, I want to see what they did to my son." And they opened up the coffin so she could see Emmett, and she said, "I want the whole world to see what they did to my son." And they said, "Okay, ma'am. Well, we're gonna close the coffin up. It was, and you'll prepare for the funeral." And she says, "No, I want an open coffin. I want the whole world to see what they did to my son. This is wrong. He's a 14-year-old boy." Um, and what happens next is the media, the news shows up and they take a picture. And I'm going to warn you, you can look away if you want to because it's pretty grotesque. But this is the picture um, of Emmett, and that it just does. It looks surreal. That doesn't look like a person at all. And they said he looked older for his age, that he was a 14-year-old boy, but he was tall and lengthy, and maybe looked like he was 18 or 20. Um, and you can't even make this out. So this picture is in every newspaper across America and the North, and people are eating their breakfast and they're like, "What is this? This is disgusting." And everybody could not deny what was going on in the South, that they were beating and brutalizing and hurting African Americans in the South. And as a result of that, people said, "Look, we got to do something about Mississippi." And the government got involved and they wanted to make sure that this is a fair trial. But what you have to understand is Mississippi is going to run its own self, and they do not like people. They believe in states' rights and this idea that they're their own culture and place, that the government, federal government, shouldn't even be there. Also, murder is a state crime unless it's if it's a hate crime, or certain crimes are federal. So Mississippi gets to try the murder. And of course, we know that the jury is going to be it's going to be all white men. And the jury goes on, and it's basically the whole case is a show. Everybody knows that the store owner and his friend are just going to walk away. A white man had never been convicted in the state of Mississippi for killing a black man. Lynching, murdering, beating, teenager, boy, did not matter. That was just going to be protected in this mindset at the time. And I mean, it's so obvious that the press are there and everybody's watching this case. That the story goes that basically the police chief or the sheriff of the town, he talks to the jury because while they're deliberating, he says, y'all need to go across the street and get yourself a Coke, meaning soda. So they go get a soda and pretend like they're actually talking about it because everybody knew they were going to announce that they were innocent. And they came back, they deliberated like for maybe an hour or so, and of course they're innocent. And this just causes an uproar that there's no justice in the South for African Americans. And this is watched by people in the North that have kind of ignored the South. They're like, yeah, we heard there's lynching and racism in the South. Not that there isn't racism in the North, but not to this extent. And this is in your face racism. This is kind of like, in my mind, the video of Michael Brown, where Michael Brown was, or I'm sorry, George. It's kind of like the video of, I'm losing it. George Floyd. Okay. And it just is a huge turning point because there's no denying the physical evidence. A picture and a video really are worth 1,000 words. And what happens is it is considered kind of a launching pad of the civil rights movement. So what happens is people go down there, white people go down there and help to register people, African Americans, try to get them to vote, to get them more actively engaged, to protect them. And there's other crimes that are going to be committed later on, where other people are being murdered for helping African Americans as well. But it starts as what we know as the right after Brown versus Board in 1954, this modern day civil rights movement. And what I want you to understand next is the reason I know this story so well is because the guy, the store owner, sold the whole story and told probably the truth for a couple $1,000s to Look magazine, to this magazine. And he told them because he wasn't convicted. And you have to understand under the Fifth Amendment, you have what's called double jeopardy, which means that you cannot be tried for the exact same crime twice. So he couldn't be tried for murder after admitting it. And that's why he sold the story. I think it was within 2 years of this happening for a couple $1,000s because he won some money. And that's what we know. And there's been all kinds of crazy things about this case. Like the whole whistling thing's made up, as we know. His uncle said it too, that was never the accusation. And the woman, we have records, the woman did not accuse him of whistling at her. And the woman herself, and on her deathbed, supposedly stated that this was not true, that the boy never did say anything inappropriate to her, and she had just infuriated her husband for him maybe being disrespectful. And it just boggles your mind that this happened.